Welcome to episode 39 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on July 21st, 2020. Today I'm bringing you an interview with Erin Pirro of Morehouse Farm Yarn. We will be talking about growing up on a sheep farm, yarn production in a time of COVID, and plans for the future. It's a long chat, but I think you'll enjoy it. Before we get into it, though, we have a bit of housekeeping, but just a bit. Let's get started. First, thanks a bunch to Andy and Marissa for supporting the show on Patreon. I am so glad to have you on board as producers of the podcast. Patrons really are the producers of the show. You're helping to keep the bills paid around here, and I very much appreciate it. In return, patrons receive some benefits as a thank you. Please hop over to patreon.com/IThoughtIKnewHow to learn more about that. Our Knit Along with Morehouse is starting this Friday. There are more details in the episode, but I wanted to add here that the information for the Knit Along will be posted first in the Morehouse Merino Flock group on Facebook. I should then be able to share it to the I Thought I Knew How Facebook group. We're still working on the settings for everything, but on the I Thought I Knew How Facebook group, there you will find a thread that will go up a few days after the Knit Along starts for a giveaway. Now, normally with prizes for our knit-alongs, I reach out to a lot of contacts and rustle up a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, this time around, I have just been slammed with my day job work stuff, in part because I am actually quitting my day job work stuff. As of August 8th, I should have finished my final book and will no longer be working as an editor. Editing was something I started when we were living in the Philippines, and I was sort of at a loss with how to fill some time in my day. I enjoyed it. I felt passionate about it and the books I was working on, but now that we're back in the US, my time is more limited, and I'd honestly rather pursue my interests in knitting and wool and the community we are building together. And I'd like to have the time to get the next swatch done for the Master Hand Knitter program. So the editing is coming to an end to make room for that. I'm a little sad, but I'm mostly excited about the possibilities. Anyway, that's a big long digression. What I was saying was that because I'm wrapping up so many loose ends with my day job, I did not have time to wrestle up extra prizes from secondary sources for the knit along. But I do have several items that have been sent to me over the last few months by very kind people in the fiber community, and I'll be putting those up as gifts. To qualify for the prizes, you will need to post a progress picture on the giveaway thread by September 1st. You don't need to have it done. You just need to have made progress. Everyone who posts a progress photo will receive one entry and only one entry, but feel free to cheer each other on and comment on other people's progress. I'll have Siri pick random numbers to award the winners, and I'll announce the prizes the next day. I'm not going to be specific about the prizes now because I'm going to do another search through everything before I settle on them. But I can say that there will be a hank of Morehouse Merino from Erin, and there will be some pattern books and stitch markers and jewelry, and I'm not sure what else yet. The thread will probably not go up, as I said, until a few days after the giveaway has started, because I'm going to be finishing up a road trip with my daughter as we do the first few days of the knit along. How's that for piling things on my plate? Ending a job, starting a knit along, heading out on a road trip. It's like a Venn diagram with insanity in the middle, but I think I'll get through it okay if I pace out a few tasks, like getting the giveaway prizes set in stone and posted. A reminder to patrons at the ribbing and higher level that we have our second patron knit night for this month, the night after this goes live. So Tuesday, July 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern. I hope to see you there. Let's have a song before we launch into the interview. This is, fittingly enough, Song for You by Tom Goldstein.
If you want to hug the sky, you just need to fly high. It will be cold for a while, but at the end of time I will be on your side. Whoa, please don't go too far. want to travel miles, pack your dreams and thrive outside. I will be here for advice while you get into the wild. Whoa, please don't go too far. Whoa, please don't go too far. To leave this world and just leave my heart alone in the dark. I remember we used to smile, but please don't go too far.
I'm here with Erin Pirro of Morehouse Farm, where she oversees the creation and marketing and sales of American-grown and processed superfine merino yarn in 8 different styles and over 100 different colorways. Erin grew up on her own family sheep farm and is in the process of setting up her own. And we are going to talk about what it was like to grow up on a sheep farm, how she came to be involved with Morehouse Farm, the early days of Rhinebeck sheep and wool, what it's like to be a yarn producer under the current conditions, and the future of Morehouse. Erin, thanks for coming in to talk to me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Always love to geek out with fellow fiber enthusiasts.
So your parents have a sheep farm, and you grew up as a farm kid, which I think is an experience that is getting rarer and rarer these days. What was that like for you growing up on a farm?
Well, growing up on a farm, we had the biggest not only playground, but learning center one could imagine, because every day was different. And I think that's something that still sticks with me today. I really, really enjoy the variety of being able to be involved in a farm and a yarn business and all the different things that we get to knit.
What type of sheep did you grow up around? What type of farm do your parents have?
My parents have natural colored Romneys and Texels. Those were always the breeds that we had grown up with as we were young kids in 4-H and FFA, needed projects to be able to demonstrate that we were learning the different skills and the leadership that comes along with that. And those breeds were dual purpose, still are dual purpose, and worked out really well for what we were trying to accomplish. And my dad is a lamb connoisseur and is always learning about different recipes from different places in the world. And his diverse customer base is amazing for sharing the favorite foods that they grew up with and their family recipes. So you never go hungry at Sepe Farm.
Did he grow up raising sheep as well, or is that something he got into as an adult?
He actually is the first generation of sheep farmers in our family, and wow. I'm the third, which is a funny way to say it. But when my dad went off to college, my grandfather took over the flock.
Oh, wow.
And then after college, my dad got sheep again and ended up managing a farm in eastern New York, which is where we grew up. So that was a really neat transition and something you don't get to say every day.
Did he get involved with 4-H or something like that? Is that why he started with sheep?
Yeah, it started as a 4-H project, and he wanted to be a veterinarian and learned very quickly, he says, that he wanted to work with healthy animals, not sick animals all the time. And that's why he became a farmer and an agriculture teacher rather than a veterinarian. And that meant you could do a lot more with flocks in terms of raising sheep and looking for the best genetics for fleeces and for lamb production, and was really able to make that happen in his own flock, or a flock that he managed, rather than if you were only working on other people's animals all the time.
Mm-hmm. So as you were growing up, when did you start being involved in the raising of the sheep, or can you even remember?
There's a lot of pictures of us out in the barn when we were little that we don't even remember. I have a younger sister, and we would be out there pretty much all the time. I think when I was about 5, we picked out our first lambs to show at the county fair, and that meant we had to not only pick them out, but then we had to halter break them, which is like training a puppy to walk on a leash. You need to train your sheep to walk on a halter, and you need to train it to stand still for the show ring, and you need to be able to clean it and groom it, and then be able to show it at the end of the season. So it was a lot of learned responsibility for projects that we were really passionate about at an early age, and then that's what you do.
So you had your 4-H project, sheep or lamb that you would raise, but what sorts of other things were you doing to help out on the farm?
Oh, golly, whatever needed to be done. We joke that when you want to learn to shear sheep, your first job is as a rousty. So your job is, depending on how big you are and how old you are, in the wool tower. Because on a smaller operation before there was all the machinery to bale the wool, the tower, if you can picture 4 ladders forming a square, there is a giant burlap sack that is hung from that. And the ladder is, well, golly, at the time it seemed giant, but it's probably 6 or so feet tall. And as little kids, we had to climb up there, get down into the bag, and the fleeces would be dropped down into the bag. And it was our job to stomp on them, to pack them down as best we could. And once you're inside this sack, there's no way out until it's full. So that was one of the first jobs. And then, of course, cleaning up the boards, making sure that you were quick with a broom to make sure that none of the debris left behind, the belly wool or any of the little bits, those are all off of the shearing board. Then it was handling the sheep to bring them out to the shearers to make sure that they were there and ready to go as soon as the shearer is ready for the next sheep. And then eventually learning to shear ourselves.
And how old were you when you started shearing?
I was probably 12 when I did my first sheep. And, it takes everything out of you that you didn't even know you had because it's a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah, the videos of shearers and the times I've seen them doing demonstrations at the different fiber festivals and stuff, they make it look so easy. They just flip the sheep, onto its like haunches, I guess you would say, leaning against them. And then they can just shear away and it just looks so peaceful for the sheep and everything. And then I'm like, I bet they've practiced this a lot.
A lot. Yeah. And I think that is a very good observation. When you watch a professional do a really good job, you think, oh, that's easy and I want to try it. And then you end up realizing, wow, I'm giving a haircut to a moving target. And if you have ever held a cat, you know that there's a certain way that you need to handle them to make them comfortable and keep them safe so they don't hurt you and they don't hurt themselves. And same thing with sheep. If you know how to handle them properly, then everybody remains calm and the process is wonderful. But if you're afraid of them or you're not sure how to handle them, then, things don't go as planned. So it's important to know what you're doing. And that's one of the neat parts about working with new sheep owners is making sure that they understand the proper ways of doing things. For instance, one is use a halter. Don't use a collar because the artery in a sheep's neck is something that can get pulled on if you're using a collar. But a halter is actually not just a lead. It also helps you steer because you're able to point the nose in a different direction and move the sheep the way you want it to go. And then there's also handling. How do you work when you don't have any of those tools like a halter? And if you can do that, then you can pretty much do anything.
So do you get a sense as well? So there's the actual physical handling of the sheep, but then there's also like the inner voice, right? Telling you how you're doing as you're handling these sheep and your confidence level, I guess you would say. And I've been around horses enough to know that even if you are acting confident, sometimes horses pick up on the fact that you are not really confident on the inside and will behave accordingly.
They
know. You find the same with the sheep that they can get a sense?
Different sheep and different breeds act differently, but they can sense if you're nervous and they're nervous too, right? Sheep don't have a lot of natural defenses in the wild. Their safety is in numbers. So if they pick up on anything, that's what they've been honed to do over the years to keep safe.
Yeah.
And that's also why it's important to handle your sheep. Just like any animal, if you need to be able to do something like trim your dog's toenails, it's important that you work on it so that it's not a traumatic experience. If it only happens, once a year, that's a lot trickier than if you do it regularly so that everybody's used to what has to happen.
That's a good point. Yeah. If you're never touching your dog's feet, except for when you're trying to trim their toes, then it's weird. Why are you touching my feet?
And I know what's coming,
Yeah.
right? Why does the cat disappear when you're ready to take him to the vet?
Yeah, exactly. They can tell.
But if they're used to be handling, and that's one of the things that's so neat. My dad always prides himself on visitors to the farm because he and really my mom spends so much time with the lambs when they're young that they are so friendly. They'll come right up to you. And, you know, he always says, this is a low stress environment. One of the best places to grow up.
Yeah. I tell my husband I would love to live adjacent to sheep because I don't know if I could be trusted with the ongoing care of sheep, but I would love to just like have my friends next door that I can reach over and pat and be friends with.
Anytime. We'll put you on vacation shepherd duty.
Excellent. That sounds great to me.
Because that is the important part, and you develop a habit around it. So when you're little and you get up in the morning, the first thing that needs to happen is the sheep need to be fed. And that means before you have breakfast, and that they don't know if it's a holiday morning, you know, whichever holiday you celebrate. But for us, it was Christmas. And, well, they don't know it's Christmas morning. They still need to be fed before you get to do anything else that day.
Have fun.
And then again in the afternoon. So it's definitely develops a habit and a discipline that I don't think you have if you don't have that kind of a routine or a responsibility. And there's lots of other ways that you can do that too. Some people play sports. Some people have animals. We had the opportunity to have livestock, and that was not only our great training ground, but quite a responsibility and a really neat way to grow up.
Yeah, for sure. So you grew up on one sheep farm, but you very early on became involved with another sheep farm. How did you get involved with Morehouse?
My parents and Margaret and Albrecht were friends through the Dutchess County Sheep and Wool Growers Association, which you know probably as the group that hosts Rhinebeck every year. So I can remember the sheep breeder meetings, and my sister and I would come as little kids, and someone would pass us some crayons and a coloring book to keep us occupied. And my parents and the picturers would always be sitting at the same table or, mingling with other shepherds and talking about the future of the sheep industry. Well, there we were. So it was, just folks that are all part of your world from an early age. And they didn't have any kids of their own. So, hey, we could have this young lady come over and help us out with some work. And I can remember during lambing season, one of the big things would be to go out and check the lambs or check the ewes for lambs, make sure everybody was okay, make sure that nobody needed any help during the course of the night every few hours. So that was one of my first jobs, helping out at Morehouse. And being European, they would eat a lot later than I was used to eating. So it felt like we were up half the night anyway. And Margaret's joke was always that she always had plenty of peanuts out for you to snack on. And by the time dinner was ready, nobody was hungry anyway.
So when you would help with the lambing, then would you actually stay at the farm?
I would. It was probably half an hour from our house at the time, from farm to farm. And I think it's good that you learn to work with other folks, not just because there are different ways of doing things, but the responsibility of being accountable to someone other than mom and dad teaches you a lot about the rest of life.
Yeah, for sure.
Because someone else is expecting you to carry through on this, and hey, can't disappoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as you got older, you started doing more things at the farm.
Yeah. So at the beginning, helping with feed if you're small. Golly, I was probably 8, 10 at the time. I'm not big enough to lift a hay bale, so I'm not a lot of help. And I could carry, buckets of grain or fill up water buckets, things that small children can do. But then as you get older, you have more responsibility and need to be able to carry through with that. So feeding, trimming hooves, always important. Being able to move the sheep from one pasture to the next and not have them get out. That's always important. The dogs or the chickens or whatever else needs to be fed as well. And then really, really fortunate that I had the ability to learn Margaret's marketing, which was very unusual for sheep farms at the time. So I would go with them to craft festivals like the one at Lincoln Center, right in Damrosch Park outside the Met. And that was a pretty amazing experience because here I am not only helping them sell yarn right in the middle of New York City, but it was my job to shear sheep and introduce people to the fact that we start with the animals. And then after shearing, we process the wool all the way through to the yarn that you see here.
And that started when you were in your teens?
Yeah. So I would take the weekend away from high school and then continued on through college to be able to help with that. And it was kind of a neat break. It was almost like our little family reunions. Even though I was away at school, I would come back for this.
Very nice. So you mentioned that you've been involved with Rhinebeck from a very early age.
Yes.
A very early age.
Yeah.
How do you remember it when you were a child? What was it like then?
It was the fall event at the fairgrounds. So the Dutchess County Fairgrounds was home to a lot of different agricultural activities. So in the spring, it was the wool pool where farmers that didn't want to market their own wool would bring it to sell it in bulk on a commercial scale. So that happened in June. And there's a picture of me at 2 months old with my parents and my grandparents at the wool pool that my mom pulled out the other day. And then in the fall, August-ish, the Dutchess County Fair hosts a lot of livestock competitions, and the fair that everybody knows with the Midway and the learning centers and everything that goes on with that. And then in October was what was called at the time the New York Bred Ewe Sale, where farmers would bring their sheep and exhibit them in a sheep show, looking for, of course, the best ones in the blue ribbon. And at that time, a lot of the ewes would have been bred for then spring lambing. So if you needed to pick up some additional bloodlines for your flock, wanted to improve some fleeces or other qualities, that's where you would go. So I remember it as a sheep show with a few yarn vendors. And look at how the festival committee has taken it to an amazing yarn show with a few sheep and llamas and alpacas and other fiber animals.
Yeah.
What a transformation.
It really is amazing. I don't know it from the early days, but I can imagine having gone to other sort of fairground level events, where you're mainly there for the sheep, to what it is now, where it's just building after building after building. And then outside of vendors there with not just yarn, but tools and all sorts of things for knitting. It's really incredible, just the size and the scope. And it's an amazing experience. I've only been once. I was hoping to go again this year. Unfortunately, it's not happening this year, but I'm looking forward to next year. But not just the size, but also the community that's built up. You would see people meeting up where it was obvious like they hadn't seen each other since last year and they were excited to get caught up with each other. And then, of course, the Rhinebeck sweater where you knit something new to wear and wear it the first time there and have that to show up, and the different meetups and stuff that goes up. It's amazing how they've been able to tap into the community.
And I think one of the early things that they concentrated on, and this I can appreciate because my parents are so aware of it, and Margaret and Albert were as well, is that for a farm to be successful, they need to be sustainable. And that includes economically as well. And the thing that the Sheep and Wool Growers Association has done really well is given farms and other vendors in the fiber-related community a vehicle to be able to market their product.
Yeah.
Because when you think on a farm, you're not only the grower, the producer, but then you have to be the processor as well. And you need to be a weatherman, and you need to be able to be, assimilate whatever feed you need for your livestock. So you're growing other crops or sourcing other crops. And then after all of this is done, you still need to market it at a price that will allow you to come back and do it again next year. And the tricky part on a farm is because of the way the seasons change, and it's slow fashion and slow food, as my dad always says, you only get a chance to do it once in a year.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, it's a whole other year before we get to try it again.
Yeah, and there's a lot of farmers dealing with that this year with everything going on with COVID. It's been shocking to see the effects of COVID on the wool market and by extension on the farmers, and how low the wool price has gotten for so many of the farmers that you're starting to see farmers talking about, well, we're just going to burn the fleeces this year because it's not worth the transportation costs to get it away from the farm. It's just heartbreaking.
It is, especially when you've worked all year for that. And if you're counting on that to be able to pay the bills so that you can come back and do it again.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking. And that is one of the things that Margaret was adamant from an early time. If we were going to buy a farm, it was going to have to pay for itself. And that means really, really taking a hard look at what are we doing? What are we spending our money on? What is our product worth? And what is the right market for it? And she was a brilliant marketer. She did kits before anybody thought kits were a thing, because she could see the decisions were hard when you needed to make sure you were matching up the right yarn with the right pattern to get the right project.
Right.
Why not put it all together and make it easy?
Yeah.
And then you took the stress out of the buying decision because I know with confidence I've got everything that I need. Now I can just concentrate on the part that's important to me, enjoying my craft. And she was way ahead of the curve on that. So we can thank her for really putting Morehouse on the map with not just the kits, but the critters for knitters, because she could see something in nature and knit it.
Right.
And then write a pattern so the rest of us could enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's a brilliance that was really a big loss when, she was no longer with us. But thankfully we have all those designs to continue to knit with and remember her by.
Yeah. And the legacy continues too. You're still bringing in other designers and putting together new kits for people. And that is one thing I've noticed. So Erin has a group on Facebook called the Morehouse Merino Flock that you can join. And it does seem that people are just really appreciative to just know there's a kit, to just know this is the yarn I need. Here's my color options. I know I'm going to get everything I need to just make that thing and just move forward with it.
Right. And if the hardest part is picking out the color, we're doing pretty good.
Right.
But that's what's so important, I think, about the community and the learning. And that's what we try to concentrate on for the knit-alongs, is it's not about speed. It's not a race to get done. It's not seeing how many of these things you could make, but really building a habit of some time to take care of yourself, do something that's good for you so you can be good to others. And then learning, because we say our rule is include. You can't say the word can't unless you say the word yet after it, because it's just a question of learning and practice. And I know we're all busy. Most of us don't like when we don't get it right the first time, but I don't know about you. I was not so good with a spoon the first time I tried it.
Yeah, the group is so very supportive, though, as you go through these knit-alongs. I think I've been on, I don't know, maybe about a year now. And I haven't done all the knit-alongs, but I'm sort of lurking when I'm not doing it. And it's so heartening to see people step up and offer advice or encouragement, because I think so many of the people on the group have been there for a long time. So they have internalized a lot of the mottos that you have, like you can't say can't unless you add yet. Behind is something you sit on. It's not where you are in your knitting, A
very important one, perspective on life, especially now.
So people, it's a very, I don't want to say low key, but I guess I do want to say low key. It's a very low key way to work through a project and still have the support that you need and the encouragement that you need. It's not, as you said, it's not a race to the finish. No one's trying to be the first one done or anything. But if someone does get done sooner, it's not like, oh, you got ahead of us. Or, it's just everybody's working at their own pace and enjoying the process together.
They are. And, I'm learning new things as we go along. Not only do I have to learn it so that I can help video it to teach it, but it's techniques I had never looked at or thought about before. And then I'm seeing, some of the knitters that pop in, Ted is teaching me about stretching so that I don't have to worry about injuring my hands if I'm knitting a lot.
Right.
And Rita is picking some amazing colors together that I never even thought of, and they look amazing. And then we've got Mary, who's popping in with different ways to do techniques that I had never seen or heard of, but darn, that's a lot easier than the way I was doing it.
Yeah.
So you never know what you're going to pick up. And if we can build a toolbox with all of these things, there's nothing we can't knit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have knit along coming up, and we will talk about that. Let's talk about it now.
Okay. Okay.
So we have a knit along coming up. It is the first of a series of 3 knit alongs that you will be hosting. I'm going to be helping out with the first and the third one. And the point of this, or the goal of this series, is conquering lace. So why did you decide to take on lace at this point in time?
We were asked for it. So at the end of last year, I said, all right, what are your 2020 goals? And I think they went out the window for a lot of people. As it happened. But many of us are finding that our lives are quite different in the middle of COVID. And when we have the mental space to be able to take on something new, a lot of us are learning, which I think is fantastic for a lot of different reasons. But one of the things that we were asked for was, I want to be able to tame lace. I'm really scared of tiny yarn and tiny needles. It seems so fragile. It seems so delicate. And oh my goodness, all those holes. How do you even, what is it? I can't do this. Yet. You can't do this yet.
Right.
And I like to remind people that 220 yards of lace is the same length as 220 yards of fingering or sport or bulky or whatever you're knitting with. And if you tackle it with a project that uses a decent sized needle, these are all on 6s, I think, aren't they?
I know the first one is, yeah.
So that's a pretty good sized needle. You'd knit a hat on that.
Yeah.
No problem. And then if you keep in mind that all lace is knitting, purling, maybe a knit two together with a yarn over, and everything else is just combinations of that. You know how to do this. It's just putting it all together and practice. And I think that's the part that a lot of us worry about, judgment. We're really hard on ourselves if it doesn't come out right the first time. And we're worried about what other people are going to think. But they're sharing the journey with us.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing when we can create when we stick with it.
For sure. So we have sort of planned these knit-alongs so that the skills build on one another. So all of the patterns are coming from, the book is called Shawls, Wraps, and Scarves by Louisa Harding. And we are going to be knitting all of them in the Morehouse yarn. The first one is the Morehouse Merino Lace. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that yarn?
Yes, this is originally from the mill, a single spun, which means one ply, and it is about 7 to 8 stitches per inch, usually on a 1 to 3. So now we're working this up on a size 6, and it is beautiful and light and open and airy. And when we had these at Vogue Knitting Live in New York, a few different shawls, the first thing people would say when they picked it up was, "Oh, it's so light."
Yeah.
And it packs amazing depth, warmth if you need it, or comfort if you don't, into not a lot of ounces.
The entire shawl is under 2 ounces of yarn.
And when you think about that, just to be, wearing or carrying around in case of extra air conditioning or an extra chill.
Yeah. That's not going to make a difference in your bag.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The first project is called the Lark Alvina, and it's a very simple shawl to get us started with. So we're going to be practicing yarn overs and knit two togethers and following a pattern, basically. And it's not even much of a pattern to follow, just sort of keeping track of where you are in the pattern with the repeats. And
I resemble that remark.
So Erin got a little excited and just kept going with the pattern.
I like big shawls. What can I say?
So Erin has a modified version of the shawl. And if you'd like to knit one a little bigger, you will actually need 3 ounces of the yarn. So 3 of the normal sized hanks. But Erin will walk you through, as we do the knit along, how to do the larger version that she did.
And what that means is I had a different number of stitches when I was working the border. Anne's is beautiful and really lines up exactly with how the pattern was written. I mean, it's very delicate work and it's gorgeous. Anybody can do this. Anne set us a really good example. And then I realized, oh no, I have more stitches that aren't going to divide evenly into that border if I continue on. What am I going to do? And hey, I love math. I do math for my day job.
Yeah.
Take a Patty Lyons class if you're afraid of math. She will help you sort it all out. So that's what we did. And I made a point rather than a square tail. And now you have 2 to choose from. So
yeah,
knit whichever one moves your spirit.
That's right. That's right. So we tease Erin, but she did a great job on hers. The difference is that on how it's written, the points of the edging end up sort of squaring off at the bottom the way it's written. But with Erin's, you end up with an actual point at the bottom, which is what you normally see in a triangle shawl. I think a lot of people, they expect it to come to that point. So you might want to take a look and see which way you want to have it look. You might purposely do it larger so that you can have that point at the end. We will have links, of course, in the show notes to all of these things, as this is coming out on a Monday, and we are starting the knit along on this coming Friday, after this comes out, but that's okay. It's a long enough knit along that you can catch up with us. And even if you don't catch up, all of the instructions are going to be there for you. So that's not a problem at all. Just join in when you can. And we have 2 more coming in December. We picked a pattern that will incorporate beading. And you might think that we're crazy for picking a beading project for December, but we did it on purpose because we will start the project at the beginning of the month. And this project actually starts with the beading in the edging, and you start with the edging. All of the learning or the more complicated part of the knit along will happen at the beginning of the month. And then the rest of the month is stockinette. So as you're, dealing with the holidays, you have this nice project that you can just pick up and put down as you finish out your month. So I forget what that one's called. Avant?
Avant.
Avant. Yeah. That's how we're pronouncing it. We're not quite sure. And then the third one will come in January. And that one is the Tansy shawl. And that one has all over beading. But you can decide how many beads you want to incorporate into it. And that's a little capelet that we'll be doing that has all over beading and all over lace work too. But the lace is not a complicated lace pattern. Looking at it, it's actually sort of a confident beginner pattern, even though it looks very impressive.
And that's what I love about lace. And I think it turns people off in that they think, oh, I could never do that. But that's the secret.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I want to let everybody in on is it's not nearly as hard as it looks.
Right.
If you can do something beautiful and easy that looks amazing, why not? Why does it have to be so much more complicated than that? And I'm going to learn beading with this. Victoria from McNitty in Houston, Texas is going to join us to teach us how to do beading properly because that's a technique I've never learned yet. And I'm excited to add that to my toolbox. So I'm really looking forward to these and building on the skills, as Anne said, and then also makes the book really an exciting purchase because that's more than one pattern.
Yeah.
But you get 3. I think we'll sneak in a 4th for the gift knitting in October, November time frame.
That sounds good to me.
We talked about that because Anne and I have this plan to knit them all.
Yeah.
We're going to have to keep each other accountable for this. And
Pretty sure we're going to do it all.
Pace ourselves, but I might know where there's a pasture where we can go stand and wear fancy dresses.
Guys, wait, if you have not seen this book before, Erin is teasing me, but she has every right to because I told her that the book makes me want to dress like a bridesmaid with smoky eye and go stand in a field and knit all day because that's what all the models are
doing in the book.
They're out in a field dressed like a bridesmaid, just wearing beautiful shawls, which is my new life goal.
And that's really good for Anne to rub off on me because my thought of what do we do in the pasture is I had this dream that we would all knit the same Rhinebeck sweater out of Morehouse Yarn. And then because it's COVID and we have to be socially distanced, we would all get a 10-foot square in the field and we would all stand 10 feet apart in our sweaters and have a drone fly over.
Oh my gosh, that would be awesome.
Because Anne's husband had a drone that he could bring along and then we could just have a giant group photo, all appropriately socially distanced in our Rhinebeck sweaters.
That sounds amazing.
And it would be way cooler than the Zoom version, which was pretty fantastic. But I laughed out loud when my husband said, I knew what that reminds me of. And he shows me a picture of the Muppet Show ending credits.
Excellent. Well, maybe we could all learn a song. My husband will love that because it will give him an excuse to get a new drone because he just drove it into the ocean the other day. So, but he wants another one. So yeah, okay. He'll be happy to have an excuse.
I'm an enabler.
That's okay. Now I have something to get him for Christmas. It's hard to know how to plan ahead for things like this, like our kooky drone picture in the field, because we don't know with COVID what we're going to be able to do. We were together in January at Vogue Knitting Live in New York, and just, talking to you and knowing my own plans, I think we both had very full years ahead of us as far as, marketplaces and events and things that we were hoping to do. And now that's all sort of gone out the window and we're trying to figure out alternatives and things like that. How have you had to modify your plans with everything going on?
Well, we certainly have not been able to attend the festivals that have been canceled. That was really, we miss that. It's fun. It's a lot of work, but it's where we get to connect with a lot of people. And there's nothing like touching yarn, especially Morehouse yarn. I love handing someone a skein and then having them go, oh.
Talking about the sample of the Lark Alvina that I just finished. And, I'm sort of used to working with Morehouse at this point. I've done quite a few projects with it. But this time it came out of the blocking water and I put it in a towel and, did the squeeze and then opened the towel. And it was like, oh, it's beautiful. It was, I don't know. Sometimes it just takes my breath away, this yarn thing.
I can remember Margaret, I can hear her saying this in my head, that when you knit with lace, right, you have to remember to take the full experience because you knit with it, it looks like a dish rag. It's just an ugly duckling. It needs the chance to transform, and you transform it by blocking it, and it blooms and it opens up and it shows the patterns and it flows freely and it blows in the wind and just all the things you wish you could do in a movie, right, in your own shawl. And
Right.
if you don't finish all the way out, you don't get to enjoy all of that.
Yeah.
So never be afraid to give your woolens a bath.
Right. So we can't take the yarn to the people to be touched right now.
However,
So how are you taking it to the people?
well, what we're trying to do is make sure that our website has everything that you need for your projects as we are going through our knit-alongs, certainly, and bringing in different collaborations with different designers that we haven't worked with before, and certainly some that we have. Vanessa Knits has been fantastic to work with in terms of she designed the Calvin sweater. That's going to be our adult-size Rhinebeck sweater for this year, so stay tuned for that one coming early September. And then it's really allowed us to make good use of that, because what better place to shop than from your couch? You know, if you need something, you can just go get it. And then what we did have to change was our open farm day. Twice a year, we invite yarn crafters to come to the farm, not only shop all of the yarn, touch all of the yarn, see the new projects, but meet the sheep.
Yes.
Which is something you can't do at the average yarn store. And because we needed to be able to keep our distance, and our studio is in a small place, we took that online, and Anne was an immense help. She was our gracious hostess for the whole day. And we had everything from, well, Albrecht reminiscing embarrassing stories about me as a child, hearing about how Morehouse started with the chicken that was rescued from Riverside Drive in New York City and taken to the office building for the day before it could be brought up to the farm, all the way up to two dogs stealing the show, wet and slimy, from swimming in the pond. So you never know what's going to happen on a farm.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
But it gave us the opportunity to showcase some of the things that are behind the scenes that maybe we don't get to share on Open Farm Day because there's not enough time or space to be able to do these segments. So we had a lot of ideas dropped our way after that. I'd love to see this, or I want to learn how this happens. What is spinning like? So, Anne, I don't know if it's a sneak peek at your grand plans, but that would be really fun to be able to follow a Morehouse fleece through.
Yeah, we have some grand plans that probably, hopefully, we'll be able to do in 2021. We were hoping to do it this year. And then, we don't need to talk about that.
Sorry, I was trying to throw you a, what does this sound like? Do you want to talk about this or not?
Yeah, but we're hoping to do a series on the podcast once we're able to travel around and meet with people again, where we follow a Morehouse fleece through the process. So from the shearing to the scourer, to the spinner, to the dyer, back to the farm, and get to talk to all those people along the way that make that process happen. So fingers crossed, 2021, we'll be able to do that. It's going to be a great road trip.
Sure
I'm
is.
looking forward to it.
Me too.
So hopefully we'll be able to make that happen. Another thing about the farm day too, as you were talking, I realized probably a lot of people saw aspects of the farm that they wouldn't have otherwise seen, because the shop is there right near the sheep. And I think if I were to come to the farm without you there to take me around, I would have gone to the shop and the sheep and maybe walked over to the pond.
Yes.
But you were able to take people out into the pasture. We were able to go to it's called the birdhouse, the little lakeside sitting area, Glaston area, where Margaret used to hang out and watch the birds.
And Anne's already planned a retreat there for us, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we have a lot of plans. As we were there, we were able to talk about the processing of the wool on Morehouse. Not at Morehouse, it happens elsewhere, but the steps that go on as far as the needs for processing and
that it's really minimal. I mean, something that's very important to us taking the fleece through the process is making sure we keep it as natural as possible. So I keep hearing that it's harder and harder to find yarn that is not treated to be superwash.
Right.
And our yarn is non-superwash. It's as it came off of the sheep. And
it's clean fleece that's been made into yarn.
Yeah, and we haven't carbonized it. We haven't dipped it in acid to get rid of any of the little bits of hay that sometimes sheep are messy eaters. So you can know that it came from the sheep. It got a bath, so it doesn't smell like lanolin, and then someone else can use the hand lotion.
Yeah.
Then it was spun, and then it was returned to some natural dyes that produced some pretty amazing color. And that's one thing that I think you don't think about on a farm. We try to do everything ourselves. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we, not just the Sepe family, but the Morehouse family, early on decided, you know what? Let's go do what we're good at and work with people who are good at what they do so that we can end up producing a better product. And that means we've got 118 colorways that are repeatable. Certainly there's, little bits of variation from dye lot to dye lot or fleece year to fleece year. But I could never do that if I was trying to dye things on my own.
Yeah.
So that's one of the benefits of having some pretty awesome collaborators.
I was actually just by your house the other day because one of the things that you've also been doing is some more online interactions, not just through your website, but I know we just were together to do a Vogue Knitting Live event also. Erin demonstrated how she cleans the fleece and can do that just in a bowl of water. And I got to see you do that on our Vogue Knitting Live stint. And it's really amazing how much comes off the wool just with water.
Yeah.
But we were sat there on your yard that is going to become a sheep pasture. So what are your plans for that?
Well, right now I live an hour and a half from the farm, and that's a pretty big commute. And one of the things that my husband and I agreed when we decided we wanted to look for our home was that there would be a place for us to raise sheep. And as we think about succession of farm businesses, we need to make sure that they can continue no matter who's around. So one of the things that we're going to need on a sheep farm to be is pasture and a barn. And we have tried to approach this as thoughtfully as possible and doing things in the right order so they'll all come together. We established the pasture first because if you turn sheep out to graze on brand new grass, they'll pull it out by the roots because they graze so closely. So the grass needs to be established before anything else. And that also helps us make sure that we're watching our pennies and invest in the right things at the right time. So the pasture is the first thing that we were concentrating on. And we just poured the foundation for the first barn, which also needs to be able to store yarn eventually so that we can have workshop and studio and things like that at our house so that we can make sure that Morehouse Yarn is available everywhere all the time.
Continually.
And that'll also then leave the sheep barn and going through the different designs and how many New England barn styles and plans there are because we need to design it for not only the climate, but the terrain. And one of the neatest things we saw at Wellscroft, it's a fencing company, but David will happily give you a tour of how he operates his barn using the one size of the barn that they have to store hay. And then using that also as a windbreaker insulation so that the animals have extra cover if you have a windy property, which we do. And then as the winter progresses and they eat the hay, it disappears so you have more space in the barn. And then by the time spring rolls around and they can eat pasture again, you have an empty barn.
And hopefully you have more animals filling up that space too. Because
you'll need it for lambs, exactly.
That's wonderful. And I know that this is a live project, a growing project. When I was up there the other day, they were there pouring the cement for the footings for the barn. So this is coming along.
It's really happening.
It's pretty exciting to see it grow when between visits to see the progress. You have your, what is that? Pokers and a lot of fire? Is that a lot of fires? Is that the saying?
Juggling a lot of things.
Yeah, you have your pokers and a lot of fires, Erin. So you're helping to run Morehouse. You're creating pasture and barns on your own property. And then you have your day job as well, which keeps you closely tied to the local farming community as well. Do you want to tell people about what you've been doing?
Sure. My job is as a farm business consultant. So my job is to help farmers achieve their goals, and that makes businesses run better. And when you work with family businesses, it comes with a whole host of challenges. As any of you listening know, if you work with your family, that other workplaces don't necessarily have to deal with those dynamics. And then it's also an extra layer of the multi-generational business aspect, not just because you're family, but that you'll have sometimes 3 or more generations working together for the future of a business that's going to outlast everybody. And we can, with careful planning, right, something near and dear to Anne's heart, right, and good financial and production management, which includes environmental stewardship and everything that goes along with sustainability, including the economics, as I mentioned before, so that it's a job that people enjoy doing and are compensated enough for that they can continue on. Because one of the things, the hard discussion we have to have is, what do young kids hear about life on a farm? right? They hear that the hours are long, the work is hard, and they're not afraid of those two things. But then when it comes with low pay, as you were talking about with wool prices before, you can only do that for so long. And if you have a family to support, you really can't. So understanding the economics of the business that you've chosen to be in are really, really important. And a big part of my job is being a tour guide through the numbers and thinking strategically about how are we going to make this happen so that you can not only continue your business, but the life that you have chosen to live.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you help farmers to, I guess, monetize more directly, I guess I would say, to keep that income coming?
Well, one of the first things we do is we start to look at the story the numbers are telling us about the business. What are we really good at? And there's things that we all love to do that don't make us any money. And then there's things that maybe we don't love so much, but man, if we could figure out how to really capture that, maybe it means hire someone to oversee it. And if it's good enough or we craft it correctly, we don't have to be doing that. And that's the challenge of management rather than working. And making that leap, as any entrepreneur knows, from being the worker to being the manager to then being the leader, those are three very different hats. And we don't always have the ability or the luxury to be able to switch them off as we like. So focusing mindfully on that and then making a plan for the year in numbers. That's the B word.
The budget.
The budget, right? Which nobody likes. But I have seen farm businesses transform. I'm thinking of one family that's near and dear to my heart that has several siblings that are now sitting down around a table and everybody is working in the same direction because they have the plan set out and they're able to execute on that. And they're able to compare, where are we compared to where we need to be? What changes do we need to make now? Not just waiting until we do our taxes and see what happened.
Right.
Because you work too hard as a small business owner to settle for what's left over at the end of the year.
That's the three words, right? Small business owner. Farmers are small business owners. Yeah. So they have to have the plan to stick to. And I think we think of those of us who aren't in farming, our exposure to farming is through the media, what we see in TV, you know. So a lot of us go to like Laura Ingalls kind of thing, and you're just what happens kind of thing. But there is a lot in modern day farming, I think, that you can pay more attention to. And it's not, I don't know, because you are still in many ways at the mercy of weather and global pandemics and just basic life stuff, but you can help mitigate some of that with your business plan.
Absolutely. And thinking about the different, what are the different risks that we're facing and what can we do to minimize the impact of those? Because some of them are going to happen. You mentioned being at the mercy of weather. Well, if I'm counting on the pasture to grow and we don't get any rain, which we haven't.
Yeah, it's been a very dry year here.
Haven't had nearly enough. That means we need to supplement that with hay, which is an expense we wouldn't have in a normal time. So one of the things that is so challenging in a small business is to build enough of a working capital cushion, meaning have enough money in the bank so that when that unforeseen thing happens, you don't have to stress out about it. And the worst calls I get from my clients or emails are the ones at 3:00 in the morning in February saying, I don't know if I can make payroll. I never want anyone to be in that position. Yeah. Right. Because they feel such responsibility for the people that work for them that they're caring for and providing for on that level. We can figure this out. Right. We have to pay attention and then we need a discipline to follow the plan, but it can absolutely be done. And then it's new ways, back to my childhood here again, seeing Margaret talk about, well, if people don't like merinos because they think they're little and wrinkly and dirty sheep, well, then we need to show them exactly what they are by packaging it differently. And here we are with some of the softest yarn you will ever feel, attractively put together in a pattern that she designed in a kit with everything that you need. So it's easy and the end project is fun and you love wearing it as much as you love knitting it. I know everybody says that, but it's true here.
So I'm going to put you on the spot now because we're back to the yarn. I mentioned, how many did we count up? Was it 8 different types of yarn?
Yes.
So Erin, which is your favorite of the 8?
That's where I'm supposed to say they're like my children. I love them all.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to. You have to actually pick a favorite.
Right now I am loving lace, and part of it's the season.
Yeah.
It's just so easy and packable. And when you joke about taking yarn with you on a trip, and whether that's a work trip or a vacation, wow, you can get a lot in your suitcase or your travel bag if it's just lace. But I think I really, really gravitate towards what we call two-ply sport because it's so versatile.
Yes, that's my favorite too.
It squishes down to, I think we were getting it, 6-7 stitches to the inch.
Mm-hmm. For the hat?
For the hats.
Mm-hmm.
And then Vanessa did a shawl called the Chloe shawl, which wet blocked it up to 3 stitches per inch.
Wow.
And just a really, really lofty fabric. It's fantastic for a beginner brioche cowl that we did. And it's pretty amazing in Fair Isle. So if you haven't checked out the Harriet projects in a while, definitely go look at that. I think one of the most challenging parts of taking on a big undertaking like that is the momentum to just get it across the finish line,
right,
so to speak. And Harriet and Billy have done an amazing job with all the Mackers and just, keeping that going. And so much else has happened in the meantime. Doesn't eliminate a need that started. So just trying to help out however we can.
Yeah,
I know that's near and dear to your heart, and glad to help however we can.
At last count, they were at over 90,000 pounds, which is over $100,000 that they've raised. The project, the main fundraiser, for the Shetland MRI scanner appeal, and I'll put links to all of these, has passed 750,000 pounds, which puts them almost to the halfway point of what they need to raise. But they're still with everything going on, the fundraising has continued. It's probably been a little bit slower than what they expected it to be, but Erin actually has some of the patterns that she pre-bought. So if you're in the United States, you can get paper copies of the patterns quicker if you just order it through Morehouse. And then, of course, you can get the Morehouse yarn to knit it in. I am a big fan, and I'm a big fan of knitting Fair Isle in Shetland yarn. I'm also a big fan of knitting Fair Isle and Morehouse yarn. And you end up with 2 very different results. So the Shetland gets you the very traditional fabric that's almost sleek in texture when it's done. The Morehouse... So I'm fairly new to Fair Isle, even though I've super obsessed over it over the last year.
Practice matters, right?
Yeah, and I've gotten a lot better from my first Harriet's hat that I did in the traditional yarn. And I knit I want to say the second one that I knit was in the Morehouse. And I thought, I wish I'd started on the Morehouse because as you said, the 2-ply sport has such a nice loft to it that it was so much easier to get neat looking stitches in Fair Isle using the Morehouse than it was using the traditional yarn. And now I'll say they're like my babies. I love them both. I really do love the traditional Shetland yarn, but I also really love knitting Fair Isle and the Morehouse. And so if anyone were to who's going to walk up to me and be like, ma'am, what do you like to knit Fair Isle in? But if anyone did, I would tell them those 2 to me are ideal in different ways for knitting Fair Isle. So if you are for some reason scared of Fair Isle, don't be. And I would suggest you start with Morehouse.
Oh,
to get that done. Yeah.
If we can geek out on fiber for just a sec.
That is why we exist, Erin.
Really awesome retreat. Stephanie Pearl McPhee and her group of teachers. They had Patty Lyons there, Judith McKenzie, and Debbie, who only needs one name, which is also escaping me right now. I'm sorry, Debbie. We're talking about the different fiber content, and I think the word they used was rustic. So if you think about how a plant-based fiber really droops, you end up with really long stitches. Mm-hmm. And that can have a big impact on your row gauge. And then as you work your way into, say, the alpaca, the camelid fibers, it has that same sort of hand, that same characteristic. Not quite as much because it is an animal fiber, but because those fibers are so smooth, they're not scaly like wool, then they also tend to droop and grow when you block them.
Right.
And then as you look at the different kinds of wool, from a fine wool like merino to a strong wool, which spans the gamut like the Romneys that we raised, which is fantastic for hand spinning. Mm-hmm. But those are the stronger wools that hold up to high traffic areas. The fibers don't bend as much because they are stronger fibers. And that means when you put them into a loop of a stitch, they want to spring back up to straighten out. And that is why those fibers act so differently. That's why the row gauge is different if you were to knit merino versus Romney on the same needles in the same time and all of that. And that's what I noticed so different between the Shetland wools and the Morehouse. And then, but man, Jameson and Smith both have such beautiful feathery colorways.
Oh, yeah.
And millions of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I had a lot to have to wrestle, but
Yeah.
boy, do they
do.
have a
It's
palette.
extensive.
So
yeah.
it's just so neat to be able to work with so many different kinds of fibers and understand and learn the history or learn the background behind them and what they're good for. And I think if you match them up in the right place, you get a pretty amazing result. And one of those is our gator yarn, which is such a densely spun yarn. Margaret made that so that you could knit the critter lumps and bumps and have them stay in shape no matter, if a kid stuffed it in their backpack or if you sat on it, whatever, the alligator would spring right back into shape. But I'm doing a sweater now, Canisa by Noma of Bigger Than Life Knits, and it just has such good stitch definition.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see. This brilliant design has cables in place of ribbing at the waist, so I don't have to worry about any shaping. I just get to knit.
Yeah, and I have some of that gator yarn that I'm planning to knit leg warmers with because that's my current obsession is leg warmers. And I think that it's going to work beautifully in the gator yarn and I'm planning on doing, this is all planning stages. It might change, but my hope is to do Fair Isle actually in the gator yarn for the leg warmers I want to knit. I opted for the gator rather than the 2-ply because I think it's going to get more abrasion as a leg warmer. And I think the gator yarn would hold up better to it. So I'm looking forward to using that. Yeah. In fact, we're both looking at it. It's on my table in front of us right now.
Do you think there's a listener that would like to try one?
Oh, I'm sure they would.
Okay. You come up with a contest.
All right. We'll have a giveaway. Look in the Facebook group for details because Erin's springing this on me right now. Thank you, Erin.
You're very welcome.
So, Erin, 2-ply sport is your favorite of your yarns. What's your favorite kit?
The duotone scarf.
Do you want to describe that for us?
It is knit the long way with the alternating knit and purl rows, and it almost looks woven at the end of it. And this has fond memories for me because when Margaret started, she would only ever knit things in the natural colors because the wool is so gorgeous as it is. It doesn't need anything added to it. And then when she finally started on colors, they were all very, very dark colors. So I think a hunter green and a navy blue and a deep dark red. And then something happened. And the next time I visited, there was color everywhere. Oh my goodness. And then there were variegated colors, which are pretty amazing. And I'm just, if some is good, more is better when it comes to colors. Right. So I managed to save up and get one of those skeins and paired it with a natural color, and I still have this scarf. My mom pulled it out the other day. Aww. So that's why it's on my mind. But it's such a neat, easy project that's also expandable. So it became a throw as another project, and that's what I made my husband for our wedding present.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and it is beautiful. You're right; it does have a nice woven effect to it.
So, and it's just simple. It can be conference call knitting, card knitting.
Right.
Having dinner with the family knitting. You don't need to concentrate on it.
Yeah. So what is because you surprised me. I was like so sure you were going to pick one of the critter patterns as a favorite, but now I'll make it another question. What's your favorite critter pattern?
My favorite critter? That is a tough one. I think a toss-up between the hedgehog mitts and the dinosaur hat.
I love the hedgehog mitts so much. I need to knit those so badly.
Yes, you do.
I have the elephant backpack too. I think it would be between the hedgehog mitts and the elephant backpack. Although the other day I saw the dragon scarf.
Yeah.
And I need to knit that for my daughter because she has had an obsession with dragons since she was like 3.
Oh, perfect.
So I was like, and I told her about it and she's like, yeah, but it probably doesn't look like a dragon. I was like, no, it looks like a Chinese dragon. It even has like the nose hair. It even
fire. That's the fire.
The fire, the smoke coming out of it. She was like, oh my goodness, really? So yeah.
We'll have to get her a picture. But...
Yeah, I'll have to get that on the needles for Christmas, I think.
And then there's some frog mittens, which just, I look at these designs and I think how Margaret was able to see it in nature and then reproduce it in knitting. With just simple shaping. It's knit 2 together.
Yeah.
Make a few increases. Right. That's all the alligator scarf is.
Yeah.
And it's just,
they're
it's so simple. It's elegant.
Right? They're so cleverly done. Yeah. I love them. Well, Erin, we are going to move on, I think, now. I'll let you go back to real life. Thank you for coming and talking to me about yarn and Morehouse and being a farm kid. Would you like to share how people can get in touch with you and find your beautiful yarns?
Absolutely. You can always find us at morehousefarm.com, MoreHouseFarm. Only one farm, because one farm is plenty of work. We don't need multiples yet, even though we're kind of headed in that direction. And if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, it's morehousefarm.com/news. And you can find everything you need from there.
Yeah, and Erin puts out a great newsletter.
Try to make sure there's something useful in each one. So even if it's a tip or a video you want to save for later, just tuck it away. You'll find it later. And I know that's there. And then you can search the website or YouTube and come back to it when you need it.
Morehouse Farm newsletter is one I always open because there is always something in there. So thank you for putting effort into that.
Thank you for reading. And I think that's what really makes the connection in the community. Business is a relationship that's good for people over time. And when it stops being good for one or the other, then it falls apart. So we want you to be successful in your knitting so that you'll want to do more. And then we love sharing the amazing merino that our sheep grow. So everybody wins.
And it is a respectful newsletter. I do appreciate that. It comes just once or twice a month, and it's good information that is helpful. So I am a fan. Get on the
Likewise.
newsletter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks again to Erin for the interview. A few more things before I go. Congratulations to Jessica, who won the giveaway from Knit Swag in the Facebook group. Kelly Vaughn kindly donated the items from her Etsy shop, full of gifts for knitters. Be sure to check her stuff out at etsy.com/shop/knitswag. And finally, we have 3 episodes left before season 3 ends. They will be released over the next 6 weeks, and then I will be taking some time off. I don't have the exact return date yet, but I should know that by the next episode. I'm going back to the 2-week releases for the rest of the season, though, so I will talk to you again in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/IThoughtIKnewHow to make a monthly pledge, or visit ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/IThoughtIKnewHow to make a one-time donation to the podcast. You may also consider making a purchase from one of our sponsors by visiting the website ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcasts.com and clicking the link at the top that says Be a Booster. While you are on the site, you can also find the show notes for every episode. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on Ravelry and Facebook are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time.